The crystal chandeliers of the Aldrich Hotel sparkled overhead, casting glittering light onto hundreds of tailored tuxedos and elegant gowns. This wasn't just a charity gala, it was a discreet display of power, where generosity came wrapped in Dom Perignon and polite conversations about the stock market. Cole Montgomery walked in like he belonged in that light. His Tom Ford tuxedo hugged his tall frame, dark brown hair slicked back neatly, and a classic Patek Philippe watch graced his wrist. He didn't have to speak, people parted for him like his presence was its own gravitational field. Tonight, Cole wasn't here for altruism. He had been invited as the face of a youth tech empowerment fund, but in truth, he was here to maintain status and cultivate investment leads. People like him didn't show up to save the world. They came to be seen. And then he saw her. Amid the polished elegance of the crowd, there was a young woman in a simple black dress with a square neckline and no jewelry. Her brown hair hung loosely past her shoulders, her face barely touched by makeup. Yet her eyes were calm and brighter than anyone else's. She was arranging donation envelopes at the registration table, patiently explaining online transfers to an elderly couple. Cole approached. No strategy, just curiosity. "Are you volunteering here?" he asked, grabbing a drink from a waiter's tray without taking his eyes off her. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly, unfazed. "That's right. I've been helping organize this event for 3 years now." "I've never seen you at one of these." Cole tilted his head. "Maybe because I never forget a beautiful face." She shrugged. "Maybe because I'm not trying to be remembered." The answer pulled a slight smirk from his lips. Interesting. The kind of woman who didn't swarm to him like bees to honey. There was something inviting. "I'm Cole Montgomery," he said, offering his hand. "I know," she replied, shaking his hand briefly, no more than necessary. "And you are?" "Harper." "No last name?" "Just Harper is enough." For the first time in years, Cole felt ignored. Not in the performative way some women on his trial dating list had done, trying to act disinterested. No, this was someone who genuinely didn't see anything worth noting about him. He took a sip of his drink, leaning casually against the table. "I'm planning to head out early. Would you like to grab a drink with me? Upstairs rooftop bar has a great view of the park." Harper tilted her head and looked at him for a moment. No anger, no awkwardness. Just a breeze-like smile. "No, thank you. I don't drink with strangers." "We're not strangers anymore." Cole raised an eyebrow, mildly irritated by the rejection. "You introduced yourself less than 2 minutes ago," Harper replied, turning to assist another guest with the donation board. Unaccustomed to being brushed off, Cole narrowed his eyes. The air between them seemed as still as he spoke, not loudly, but just enough to be heard. "Well, I don't date below my league." The words fell like a coin on marble light in sound, but echoing farther than he expected. Harper looked up. In the warm glow of the chandeliers, her eyes seemed to cool, not out of hurt, but out of disappointment. And then she chuckled, softly, without bitterness. "That's a shame," she said, placing the pen back in its tray, "because I don't date people who rank others by status." Cole stood there, speechless. Harper turned and walked away, her simple dress skimming the floor like a wisp of smoke. He watched her vanish into the crowd, leaving behind the faint scent of jasmine and defeat. For the first time in his life, Cole Montgomery wasn't rejected because someone didn't know who he was, but because she knew exactly what kind of man he was. And he hated that truth more than anything. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Cole Montgomery wasn't the kind of man who got obsessed with women. He had everything: wealth, status, a face considered a marketable asset, and a dating history long enough to make any entertainment magazine envious. When he entered a room, all eyes turned. When he spoke, people laughed. When he waved, the whole party shifted. And yet, 3 days after the Aldrich Charity Gala, he still couldn't shake the image of that woman in the plain black dress, those unbothered eyes, and that quiet line that stung like a pin. "I don't date people who rank others by status." That sentence replayed in his mind every time he blinked like a paper cut that hadn't healed. For the first time in his life, he hadn't been rejected for being unattractive or not wealthy enough. He'd been rejected because of the way he looked at others. Cole sat in his glass-walled office atop Montgomery Tower, absent-mindedly spinning a Montblanc pen while ignoring the contract in front of him. Daniel, his longtime assistant, walked in with a tablet. "You've been off these past few days," Daniel said, half joking. Cole nodded slightly but didn't reply. He leaned back in his chair, staring into the distance. "Her name is Harper," he finally said. "Last name?" "No idea. She only said Harper, like that was enough." "Want me to look her up?" "Yeah, everything you can find." A day later, Daniel returned, brows furrowed in disbelief as he held the tablet. "She's a ghost," he said. "No social media, no LinkedIn, no mention in any financial articles. I couldn't find a single public profile aside from a few vague volunteer activities." Cole sat up straighter. "Nothing at all?" "Exactly. It's like she deliberately wiped her trail." No one in Cole's world did that. In the investment sphere, presence was everything. Everyone wanted to be known, quoted, invited, praised. But Harper was different. She didn't want to be seen, didn't need applause. She showed up, did the work, and disappeared, leaving behind a bigger question mark than any investment result. And for Cole, that question mark became an obsession. A week later, Cole attended a small private conference on innovative investment strategies in tech education. Invitation only, strictly for select private equity partners. He planned to listen to a few panels and leave early. But when the moderator announced the next speaker, his heart caught. "Please welcome Ms. Quinn, representative of the Argive Fund, to discuss anonymous investing and low-visibility growth deals." Cole held his breath. Harper stepped out from backstage, still the Harper he remembered. Simple, clean, unassuming. White blouse, dark slacks, no jewelry, hair tied low. But this time, she wasn't a disregarded volunteer. She walked onto the stage like she owned it. "We choose to stay out of the spotlight," Harper began, her voice calm and steady, "because light can blind. And when everyone's watching, very few are truly listening." The room fell silent. Harper presented Argive's low-noise, high-return strategy, small deals that avoided media buzz, but yielded sustainable, long-lasting impact. Argive didn't chase unicorns. They chased integrity, truth, entrepreneurs driven by purpose, not IPO exits. Cole nearly forgot to blink. Not one word Harper said sounded like any panel he'd attended. No jargon, no cliches, no upper-crust investor games. She spoke little, but every sentence landed like a nail hammered into oak. He realized this wasn't a woman who didn't care. This was a strategist, a quiet player on a chessboard, winning without ever needing to smile for the crowd. When the panel ended, Harper didn't linger for photos or small talk. She left immediately, carrying a plain leather tote and the same serene air, as if she hadn't just made a room forget how to breathe. Cole stood watching her go, this time not to flirt, not to recover pride, but because, for the first time in his life, he realized he'd met someone he couldn't read, couldn't control, and couldn't forget. That morning started out like any other. Same coffee shop in the Montgomery Tower office district. Same Americano. Same dull headlines on the financial news app. Cole Montgomery was lazily scrolling through the usual pieces: IPOs, the real estate market, Elon Musk buying something again, when his eyes caught a headline that hit him like slamming on the brakes in the middle of a highway. The anonymous woman behind Quinn Capital, Harper. Quinn finally revealed. Cole's heart skipped a beat. He dragged the screen back up, staring intently at the article. Every word hit him like a cold wave crashing against his skull. Harper Quinn. No way. Could it really be the same woman? He kept reading, his lips tightening with every paragraph. For nearly a decade, Quinn Capital has operated as a shadow power in the private equity world, known for deals that required no media, no PR, yet yielded above-average returns. The identity of its founder had never been revealed until today. Harper Quinn, 36, grew up in Vermont's foster care system, founded Quinn Capital at age 27 with a modest pool of personal funds, and currently holds an estimated net worth of $7.2 billion. $7.2 billion. That number didn't just stun Cole, it crushed the carefully curated ego tucked beneath his Armani suit and his usual cold-eyed confidence. He leaned back in his seat, hand trembling slightly as he held his coffee. Flashes of that night at the Aldrich lit up in his mind, clearer than ever. Harper in that simple black dress, her calm gaze, her firm refusal when he invited her for a drink. And then his arrogant words echoing back like a mocking laugh inside his head. "I don't date below my league." He thought she was just a smart, proud volunteer. He thought he was the one above. He'd even found it amusing to be turned down like it was a temporary challenge. But now he realized it was him she had looked down on. Not because Harper had more money, but because she had never needed to prove anything to him. She never said she was rich. She didn't hide who she was, but she never flaunted it either. She was just herself. And in a world where everyone was constantly trying to convince others they mattered, that quiet authenticity was its own form of power. Cole folded the iPad, set it down, and closed his eyes. Not from shock, but to contain the storm rising in his chest. Dizziness, bruised pride, and then something he hadn't expected. Respect. He had always prided himself on reading people. Give him 5 minutes and he could tell who was an opportunity, who was a threat, who was worth watching. But Harper was a puzzle he couldn't solve. She hadn't shown any signs. She hadn't dropped any hints. Just calm neutrality, so calm it had thrown him off. Not because she was good at hiding, but because she wasn't hiding at all. She didn't need to be seen, didn't need a spotlight. She let results speak for themselves. And now the whole world had heard them loud and clear. He picked up his phone, opened his contacts. His finger hovered over the empty screen. He didn't have her number. Of course not. They weren't friends. They hadn't even exchanged information. And even if they had, what could he say? Sorry for underestimating you? Or, I was a fool to think I was above you just because of money and a name? Those words sounded pathetic next to someone like Harper Quinn. Daniel walked in at that moment, a folder in hand, glancing at Cole's stunned expression. "What's going on?" he asked. Cole didn't say a word. He slid the iPad across the table. A few seconds passed before Daniel let out a low whistle. "Harper?" Cole nodded slowly, like someone swallowing a block of ice. "She didn't just reject me. She taught me a lesson." Daniel had no response. No one did, because no one could have guessed that Harper Quinn, the woman who had turned down Cole Montgomery, was actually one of the richest women in America. And no one, especially not Cole himself, had imagined he'd be floored not by her wealth, but by her integrity. Something shifted in Cole that day, quietly, without fanfare or revelation, just a new, unfamiliar feeling. He needed to see her again, not to redeem himself, not to explain or salvage his pride, but simply to say something he had never learned how to say properly. "I'm sorry." 3 days after the Forbes article, forums where insiders whispered about Wall Street's invisible queen. But in all of it, he didn't find what he truly wanted to know. Who was Harper beyond the numbers? He wanted to understand her, really understand her, not to win her over, not to prove that he wasn't so bad, but because for the first time Cole genuinely wanted to see a person, not through bias, assumptions, or social filters, just see them as they were. And that person was Harper. Cole called everyone who might know her, conference organizers, industry partners, a few contacts with ties to Quinn Capital. No one had personal information. She was a fortress of privacy. Until finally, he found a small satellite office in Soho, an unmarked, modest space used by Quinn Capital. Cole went there on a Tuesday afternoon. No warning, no assistant, no security, just a white shirt and a light gray turtleneck sweater. For the first time, he walked into a building where no one recognized who he was. And strangely, he didn't mind. The young receptionist looked up at him, polite but cautious. "I'm here to see Harper Quinn," Cole said directly. She hesitated. "Ms. Quinn doesn't meet with outside guests without an appointment." "Then maybe you could tell her Cole Montgomery would like to see her. Not for business, just to say something personal." The receptionist stared at him a moment, then picked up the internal phone. A minute later, she returned, offering a small, hesitant smile. Ms. Quinn said if it's something personal, then put it in a letter. She doesn't have much patience left for words that come too late. Cole gave a faint, ironic smile. He wasn't offended. He nodded, reached into the leather notebook he always carried, and pulled out a sheet of paper. Right there in the lobby, he sat down and wrote in clean, even handwriting. I'm not sorry that you're a billionaire. I'm sorry I wasn't kind enough to see that you were a person. No signature, but it wasn't needed. Someone like Harper would know. That evening, when Harper returned to the office after a long day of meetings, she opened the drawer where personal messages were usually left. A folded sheet of paper lay there, no envelope, no preamble. She sat down, unfolded it, and read slowly. Once, then again. No justification, no backstory, just an apology real. Harper leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She wasn't angry. She had never been angry. She simply hadn't cared. To her, Cole Montgomery had once represented everything shallow about power, someone used to being admired, used to deference, used to using words to put others in their place. She had met hundreds like him, and she had learned not to let people like that define her worth. But now for the first time she saw something rare, a powerful man, willing to apologize without making excuses. She folded the paper, neither discarding it nor keeping it. She just set it on her desk. She had no intention of seeing him again. It wasn't necessary. But inside, for the first time, the name Cole Montgomery no longer echoed with arrogance. It landed softly, like a whisper honest. Neither of them wanted it to happen. Harper Quinn didn't like working with showboats, and Cole Montgomery wasn't used to being in situations he couldn't control. But when the federal government announced a strategic investment program for national AI education, with one non-negotiable requirement, at least two national-level investment entities, one of which must demonstrate transparent performance and clear social impact. All roads inevitably led to one unlikely pairing, Quinn Capital and Montgomery Ventures. Two powerhouses that had never crossed paths, now forced to collaborate. Cole got the news first over lunch with the Secretary of Economic Affairs at the Conrad Hotel. The man casually sipped his wine and said, "We don't need another oversized fund focused solely on profit optimization. We need ethics and vision. You have the capital, she has the social influence. Together, you're the balance we need." Cole simply nodded. He said nothing. Across the city, Harper received her notice too via a somewhat blunt email from the Department of Education. "We believe a collaboration between Quinn Capital and Montgomery Ventures would represent the ideal pilot model for a national-scale AI education initiative." Harper finished reading, remained silent for 10 minutes, then gave a quiet smile. Fate, it seemed, had a particular sense of humor. Their first meeting was held in a government-rented office in downtown Washington, D.C., staged like a political photo shoot. Deep brown leather chairs, a long walnut conference table, state-of-the-art projector, silver nameplates engraved for each participant. Harper arrived first, same as always. Neat, minimal, drawing no attention. She set down her laptop, organized her materials, and kept to herself. Cole walked in minutes later. The moment he entered, he caught her eye just as calm as the last time they met. Not angry, not avoidant, just unconcerned. "Hello, Harper," he said, more polite than ever before. "Cole," she replied, flat, brief. They sat at opposite ends of the long table. Between them was a group of analysts, attorneys, and federal advisors. No one mentioned Forbes. No one brought up the handwritten note. Only reports, plans, ROI projections, and funding rounds. And Harper, she barely spoke during the first 45 minutes, but when she did, the room fell silent. Training data shouldn't be entirely controlled by AI vendors. Children aren't tools, they're learners, not data sets. We don't need a product with a pretty interface. We need a system that actually helps a child read their first sentence. Success isn't measured by how many students log in. It's by how many don't drop out after using it. Every sentence was short. Director, no fluff, and it made people listen. Cole, guarded at first, slowly leaned forward. Each time Harper spoke, he nodded. She was unlike any investment strategist he had ever met. She wasn't selling a dream in glittery packaging. She was laying concrete foundations. What she brought to the table had depth, substance, and no hunger for praise. The meeting ended at 3 in the afternoon. People filed out one by one, leaving the two of them behind, surrounded by the faint scent of stale coffee and the soft sunlight filtering through high windows. Cole watched Harper as she packed up her documents. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her as a puzzle to crack. He was looking at her as someone he wanted to understand, not to possess, but to respect. "You thought I'd screw this up, didn't you?" he asked, half joking, half sincere. Harper looked up, arms crossed. "Number, I thought you might learn something if you stayed quiet long enough." The remark made Cole laugh, not the cold kind, but the surprised burst of someone who knew they'd just been nailed. "Thanks for not turning it down right away," he said honestly. Harper just nodded, slinging her bag over one shoulder. "I'm not doing it for you, Cole. I'm doing it for the next child who needs a chance." And with that, she walked out of the room. Only then did Cole realize silence in some cases wasn't apathy. It was a lesson. There was one thing Cole Montgomery never expected, that change wouldn't begin with some dramatic wake-up call or a blow to his ego. It began with a list. 1 week after the first meeting with Harper, Cole received an email from the government partner requesting both funds to submit social commitment reports as part of the National AI Education Project proposal. Montgomery Ventures already had a polished presentation, animated slides, colorful charts, meticulously filmed sponsorship campaigns, even testimonials from nonprofit collaborators. He opened Quinn Capital's attachment with quiet curiosity, a PDF file, no background color, no flashy title, just a list, a long one. He scrolled through line by line hundreds of grants with no recipient names. Each simply noted, Hope Haven Foster Center, textbook expenses, 2021 academic year, sender, anonymous, TQ fund. Vocational training program at Woodville Shelter, tuition for 8 students, sender, TQ. Special scholarship for former orphan accepted to MIT, sender, TQ. TQ, not Quinn Capital, but Harper Quinn, her own initials. No one knew. Cole sat motionless. In all his years in the industry, he'd seen countless CSR, corporate social responsibility reports, each crafted like a PR campaign. But this wasn't a campaign. No cameras, no logos, no staged photo ops beside a smiling child in a graduation cap. Just action, silent, consistent, long-term, and natural. He stared at those plain lines of text with a tightness in his chest, a rare feeling for someone who had long measured life in numbers. The next day, while passing through Brooklyn on a site visit for the AI pilot program, Cole happened to spot a small banner hanging outside a community center. "Congratulations to Lily, the first orphan from Haven Home to receive a full scholarship to Stanford." Below it, a handwritten line, slightly slanted. "Thank you to the anonymous sponsor, Ms. TQ, who believed in me when I didn't yet believe in myself." Cole stopped in his tracks. He didn't go in. He just stood there, in front of the old yellow-painted building, listening to the sound of children laughing and running inside, thinking of Harper, the woman who had once coldly turned him down, but had quietly pushed open door after door for nameless children. She didn't try to look like a good person. She didn't preach about ethics. She acted and then stepped back to let others shine. No stage, no spotlight, no need to be seen. And it was precisely that made him want to keep looking at her. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was a billionaire, but because she was the only person he had ever met whose presence didn't depend on light. She shone through her silence. That night, back in his penthouse on the 43rd floor, Cole didn't turn on the lights. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city's headlights flow below like streams of gold. On the table, his phone buzzed softly with a new project notification. Harper had just uploaded notes on AI framework adaptation by income region. Just 3 lines, but clear, insightful, and so sharp he had nothing to add. He typed a reply, then hesitated, and added one more line. "Thank you for always thinking of those most easily forgotten." I'm learning that from you. He didn't know if Harper would read it. She rarely responded to personal messages, but to him, sending that sentence was enough to let him breathe easier. Because now he no longer thought of her as the woman who once rejected him. He thought of her as someone above him. Not because of wealth, but because she was the kind of person he never even dreamed of meeting, let alone wanting to change himself, just to be worthy of looking her in the eyes. It was one of those rare evenings without meetings, without urgent emails, without calls from project advisors. The shared office on the 21st floor was nearly empty. The soft yellow light from the overhead bulbs reflected off the glass tables, bathing the space in a quiet calm, like a still frame from a silent film. Cole was still there, waiting for a data analysis file from the tech team to finish uploading. He sat across from Harper's desk, his eyes unconsciously scanning the neat, handwritten notes in her project planner. Clean, precise, no crossouts, just like her controlled, discreet, meticulous. Suddenly the door opened. Harper stepped in. No makeup, no coat, just a white shirt and dark slacks. She looked mildly surprised to see him still there, but not annoyed. "You haven't gone home yet?" she asked, not cold, just plainly. "Waiting on a file," Cole replied, then added, "You? Forgot my phone." She picked up her phone from the desk. Then after a brief pause, instead of turning and leaving like she usually did, Harper pulled out a chair and sat down. A few seconds of silence passed. Then very softly she said, "Did you know I used to have a different name?" Cole looked up. "Back when I worked at a small investment fund, I used my real name, Harper Delaney." He didn't respond. He just listened. "And I fell in love with someone during that time. We met at a small industry seminar. He said he came from nothing, self-made, lived simply. I believed him. I didn't talk about my money either. Back then, I had just made my first private investment, a discreet real estate deal that brought in a solid return." Harper paused, eyes drifting towards some faraway memory. "6 months in," he proposed. I said yes. 3 days later, a leaked financial report about me surfaced in the press, one of my hidden portfolios. I had never shared that with anyone, except him. Cole didn't need to ask what happened next. He denied it, of course, then backed out of the engagement, said he couldn't live with someone who had so much to hide. 3 months later, he showed up with a new girlfriend, a journalist. There was no pain in Harper's voice, just emptiness. "I didn't sue, didn't speak out. I changed the company name, changed the name on my documents, stepped back. Since then, I've let my work speak, not my name." Cole clenched his hands under the table. Harper looked straight at him, her voice calm but deliberate. "I'm not afraid of being loved for my money. I'm afraid of being loved by someone who can't handle the fact that I can't be controlled by it." In that moment, Cole realized everything he'd once admired about Harper. Her silence, her strength, her refusal to be seen, none of it was innate. It was all born from a wound so deep it no longer bled, only left silence in its place. He looked at her for a long time. For the first time, not as a CEO looking at a partner, not as a man looking at the woman who had once rejected him, but as a human being finally seeing another human being. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. Harper only shrugged, but for the first time her eyes weren't guarded. "Not everyone deserves the truth," she said, "but some people might need it to understand." And he did understand. She wasn't cold. She didn't fear the spotlight. She had once been stripped bare in it and cut in the deepest way. And since then, she had chosen to stay in the shadows. But still, she carried light wherever it was needed. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. It was an early autumn day, and New York City had just been rinsed clean by an overnight rainstorm, leaving behind damp sidewalks and a rare, crisp clarity in the air. The shared project office was quieter than usual that morning. People worked in steady silence. No long meetings, no urgent intercom calls. Cole arrived early, but not for work. He came for Harper. Ever since the night she told him about her past, the man who had betrayed her with the truth she dared to share. Cole no longer saw her as a cold woman. He saw her as someone who had learned to live without needing forgiveness from anyone, and that made him want to show her something of his own, something imperfect. That afternoon, as Harper prepared to leave early, Cole approached and gently stepped into her path by the elevator. "There are a few things I think I should say," he said, calm, unforced, humble. She hesitated, then pressed the button to open the elevator doors and stepped aside. "Going downtown?" she asked. "Going downtown," he nodded. They sat in a small cafe in Greenwich Village, where soft light from wall sconces glowed against exposed brick, creating an oddly intimate space. No one noticed them. No one tried to recognize them. It was as if they had both stepped out of their roles for a little while. Harper ordered mint tea. Cole had an espresso. They sat in a quiet corner, far from the counter, as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them and their breath. "Back then," Cole began, "I didn't understand why you felt the need to hide yourself. I used to think, if I had $7 billion in a mind like yours, I'd stand on every stage I could find. Now, I don't think that anymore." Harper said nothing, but her gaze softened. He went on. "My mother used to be an investor. Not big, not famous, but she was smart, intuitive, and she believed success didn't have to be harsh. She started a small fund with her closest friend, the one she trusted most." He looked down at his hands, tracing old memories. "They worked together for 5 years. Then one day, she discovered her friend had been using her name to launder money. When she exposed it, he turned on her, blamed her for everything. And I was 19. I watched my mother fall apart in the headlines." Harper didn't hide her surprise. Cole Montgomery, the man who always stood tall, spoke in percentages and projections, was now telling her about wounds as if they were the most important truths he carried. She lost everything, not just money, her trust in people. She withdrew from the industry, and I decided I would never let anyone fool me again. I thought, to survive, I had to read people like chess pieces, categorize them, stay 2 steps ahead. He gave a small laugh without any joy. "And then I met you, someone I couldn't read, couldn't predict, couldn't place. At first I saw that as a threat, but over time, I realized it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Harper still didn't speak, but she didn't look away. "Thank you," she said softly, "for telling me." They sat in silence for a long time. No rush to fill it, no need to move past it, just letting the space between them settle, no longer tense like a drawn wire. Eventually, Harper lifted her teacup, took a sip, and then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, said, "If you're free sometime, I know a place in West Village with decent cinnamon scones." Cole blinked, then gave a slow smile. "Is that an invitation?" "Not for the project, not for reports." She met his eyes. "Just because I feel safe." Cole didn't respond, but at that moment, he reached down and instinctively picked up a small slip of paper near Harper's side. His fingers brushed the back of her hand, and she didn't pull away. They looked at each other. No kiss, no whispered promises. Just a clumsy touch and 2 unguarded gazes. It wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the end of defense. On Monday morning, Harper woke later than usual. She brewed a cup of jasmine tea, opened the windows to let the cool air wash into her apartment, and planned to spend the morning polishing the final proposal for the National AI Education Project. Last week, things had seemed steady, not intimate, not too close, but something between her and Cole Montgomery had begun to soften, like a thin layer of ice melting into its first drop of water. Until she opened her phone. Finance news, top headline. Cole Montgomery set to acquire strategic stake in Quinn Capital through AI collaboration, a tactical move to tap into the billionaire heiress's investment network. She blinked. Sources suggest Montgomery Ventures has proposed a clause allowing for shared platform data, including preliminary access to Quinn Capital's edtech ecosystem, a likely precursor to a soft merger strategy. Harper sat still. What swept through her chest wasn't anger. It was cold. A slow, paralyzing chill that spread from her sternum to the tips of her fingers. She'd seen this before. 10 years ago, she'd been the name beside a strategic partnership and was then devoured by the very person she trusted. Back then, she spoke out. She resisted. She screamed. And no one believed her. This time, she didn't scream. She simply stood up, turned off her screen, closed her laptop, and sent one email. I hereby withdraw from the National AI Education Project. Quinn Capital will hand over all completed deliverables. No media, no statement. Harper Quinn, no closing line, no explanation. At Montgomery Ventures, Daniel rushed into the conference room mid-meeting. Did you see this morning's news? I did, Cole replied curtly. Harper's just emailed. She's pulling out of the project. No warning. Cole nodded. He knew. He had read that email 4 times. Every word felt like a slap, not loud, but sharp enough to sting. What are you going to do? Issue a public statement? Push back with the press? Cole shook his head. No point. If I speak now, she'll think it's about damage control. Daniel frowned. But it's not true. You never had that intention. I know, Cole said, eyes fixed on the window, but truth isn't enough. She needs to see something else, something I've never done for anyone before. 3 days later, the media erupted at an unexpected move. Montgomery Ventures formally withdrew all stake and participation from the AI project, even though the project itself continued. There was no press conference, no spin, just a simple statement. We do not engage in ventures that jeopardize trust between partners. Trust cannot be signed into a contract, but once it's lost, no clause can buy it back. Harper read the release on Friday evening. She said nothing. She didn't message anyone. She just sat alone in a corner cafe, a cup of tea growing cold in her hand, while the TV replayed footage of Cole walking out of his company headquarters, declining every interview. No explanations, no blame, no apologies, just a quiet, timely retreat. For the first time in years, Harper didn't know what to feel. Not vindication, not relief, but something strange. Maybe this time, someone wasn't trying to win against her. Maybe someone was trying not to hurt her any further. And that simple, wordless terrified her more than any grand speech ever could. After withdrawing from the AI project, Cole vanished from the media. No interviews, no statements, no counter-narratives, no op-eds from Montgomery Ventures. In the press, people began asking, where is Cole Montgomery? The answer? In places the financial world had never bothered to look. A small town in Vermont, his mother's hometown. An underfunded public high school where chalkboards and white chalk were still in use, and where students had never seen a line of code in their lives. And an old pickup truck Cole had rented to haul teaching equipment across rural towns in the Northeast. No secretary, no assistant, no cameras. Just Cole in a faded gray t-shirt, hair slightly unkempt, hands dusted with chalk, kneeling among a group of 15-year-olds, showing them how to run a simple Python script to control a mini robot. Every line of code is a way of telling the computer that you have a voice, he said, his eyes holding a kind of patience no one had ever seen from him in a boardroom. The small initiative was something he started under the name the Sylvia Fund, and only a few community workers knew that Sylvia was his mother's name, the woman who had lost everything in an act of betrayal and who once told him, "No one needs you to be powerful, but if you want to be worthy of someone's trust, you have to learn to be kind first." He didn't publish it, didn't tell anyone. He just did it. Harper found out about it, completely by accident. One evening while researching resources for an inner-city education campaign, she happened to click on a low-profile YouTube video titled simply, "Stranger Teaches Coding at Our School. Thank you for believing we could." The video was shot on a phone, poor resolution, but the light in the classroom was enough to reveal the man standing at the whiteboard, face smudged with chalk, sleeves rolled up, gently helping a child holding a computer mouse the wrong way. Cole Montgomery, no suit, no tie, no public image. Just a man kneeling to a child's eye level, not to teach code, but to say, "You matter." Harper forgot to breathe for several seconds. Not because he had done something grand, but because he hadn't told her. He hadn't needed her to see, hadn't asked to be forgiven, hadn't done it to score points. He did it because he had changed, truly, and that was the moment she realized. She couldn't look away anymore. Willow Creek High School sat nestled in a Vermont valley, surrounded by maple trees just beginning to turn gold and crimson. It was an old school, its roof streaked with age, its wooden windows creaking every time the wind rolled through. But today it glowed with an unusual warmth, laughter, the clack of keyboards and small cheers as coding lights blinked on for the first time. Cole Montgomery was erasing the whiteboard when Harper stepped inside. She stood at the door, a knit cap in one hand and a loosely draped scarf in the other, looking at him as if she were seeing a completely different man. He hadn't turned around yet, but one of the kids called out, "Bye, Mr. Cole. I'm bringing my robot tomorrow. I'll remember what you said. Don't wait for permission to do something big." Cole smiled, nodded, and turned to shut the classroom door, only to see her standing there. He froze. "Harper?" She didn't speak at first, just looked at him, the man she once guarded herself against, once backed away from, now standing in a classroom, chalk dust on his sleeve, eyes gentler than any headline ever written about him. "I didn't think you'd come," he said honestly. "I didn't think I would either," she replied. The classroom had emptied. The kids had gone. Only the two of them remained, surrounded by the scent of paper, chalk dust, and the quiet warmth of trust just beginning to take root. "I saw the video," she said softly. "Not a promo clip, just a shaky phone recording, but clear, clearer than any defense you could have made." Cole looked down at his hands. He said nothing. Harper took a few steps closer. No guarded eyes now, no armor of composure. Just a woman standing in front of a man, every layer of pretense shed. "Your mistake," she said slowly, as if weighing every word, "was thinking you knew everything. Being arrogant enough to judge people by appearances." Cole nodded. He didn't argue. "But my mistake," her voice caught, "was being afraid of being loved. Afraid that if I let someone in, they'd use it, turn it into a trap. I let that fear drive me for too long." A long pause, not heavy, just full. Then she added, barely above a whisper, "For the first time in years, I want to believe in someone. And the scariest part is that someone is you." Cole stepped forward. He didn't touch her, didn't grab her hand, didn't rush. He just stood close enough for her to hear his breath, to see the sincerity in his eyes. Eyes no longer belonging to a CEO or a man once broken, but to someone learning how to love without conditions. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said gently. "I just want you to know, even if you walk away, I'll keep doing good things. Not for you, not to be seen, but because you reminded me what my mother used to believe in." Harper didn't respond. She just took half a step forward, just enough for his arms to wrap around her, and they embraced. In that little classroom where the desks were uneven, and the whiteboard still held the words, "You are enough," in smudged green ink. There was no music, no spotlight, no hurried kiss or grand declarations. Just two people who once forgot how to trust, now leaning into each other in the quiet gentleness of something they never thought they were worthy of anymore. Hope. The Forbes Impact Summit took place in late autumn in New York, inside a glass-paneled auditorium flooded with natural light. It was one of the year's most anticipated events, gathering investors, founders, and leaders with far-reaching social impact. The theme this year, "The Future Begins with Trust." And under the special guest section appeared two names that made the entire finance and media world gasp in unison. Harper Quinn, the woman who had spent her life off stage. Cole Montgomery, the symbol of a new generation of leadership who had quietly stepped away from a billion-dollar deal on the grounds of trust. No one knew if they would show up. No one was sure they were even still speaking. But everyone was there waiting for an answer. Cole stood backstage wearing a light gray suit, no tie, a folded speech outline in his hand. But his eyes weren't on the paper. They were on the woman walking toward him from the other side of the corridor, midnight blue blazer, hair in a simple updo, and an expression more radiant than he'd ever seen on her before. Harper stopped in front of him. She didn't say anything, but in the quiet nod she gave him, there was an entire world of acknowledgement. She looked toward the stage where the moderator was getting ready to introduce them. Then, without hesitation, she extended her hand. Not for him to lead her, but so they could walk forward together. Cole smiled softly and laced his fingers with hers. And they walked out side by side. The entire auditorium fell silent, not from shock, but because something real was happening. This wasn't a PR couple, not a campaign. No flashing lights, no spectacle. Just two people who had walked through silence and misunderstanding and still chose to walk forward together. On stage, Harper was the first to take the mic. "I know many of you are wondering what happened between us," she began, her voice calm, clear. "We're not here to clarify rumors. We're not here to defend ourselves, and certainly not to prove we were right." She turned to look at Cole. His expression softened. "We're here," she said, "because we both learned the most important thing in any relationship, whether it's a business partnership, a friendship, or something more." She held Cole's hand tighter. "That we don't show up to prove anything. We show up to learn how to respect each other." She paused, then continued. "I'm still running Quinn Capital, but for the first time, I've chosen to step into the light not to be recognized, but to protect what I believe is right. I no longer stand behind spreadsheets. I stand in front of every decision with one question. Does this serve people before it serves profit?" Cole looked at her with quiet pride, then took the mic. "I'm still running Montgomery Ventures, but I've stopped trying to replicate success through numbers alone. I've started focusing on projects that actually change lives, especially in education, community tech, and building opportunity in the places the market forgets. I used to think changing the world was for the most brilliant people. Now I understand it begins the moment you choose to believe in the kindest thing you can do." Applause started from the third row, then spread across the room. Cole accepted the mic from her again, eyes never leaving Harper's. "I once believed you had to stand at the top to have impact," he said. "Now I know sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit down, listen to someone completely unlike you, and choose to believe them." He glanced at the room, then back at her. "She taught me that, not through words, but through the way she lives." After the speech, they took no interviews, posed for no private photos. They simply left the stage hand in hand, passing through a crowd no longer watching them with curiosity, but with respect. Because the only thing they truly made public that day wasn't their love, wasn't their past. It was the trust they had rebuilt, held not in promises, but in each other's hands. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. The small town just north of Rhinebeck, New York, nestled along the Hudson River like a quiet underline beneath the loud maps of the financial world. No one there cared about the stock market. They talked about the weather, the fall apple harvest, and the neighbor's dog who just had her third litter. It was where Harper and Cole chose to disappear, not to run away, but to begin again. Like two ordinary people. The house they rented sat at the end of a dirt road blanketed with fallen golden maple leaves. It had a wide porch, a creaky wooden swing for the afternoons, and a sun-filled kitchen. No one recognized them. No one secretly took photos. No inboxes buzzing with messages needing replies in 5 minutes. Just Harper, Cole, and enough silence to finally breathe without flinching. Cole woke early every morning. He brewed coffee, opened the windows, and read books about yeast, oven temperatures, and flour ratios. 3 weeks ago, during a coding session at the local school, the kids had suddenly asked, "Do you know how to bake?" He'd said no, and they laughed like he'd just confessed to a serious crime. That night, he decided to learn. Now he knew how to mix dough without overworking it. He knew to wait patiently for the yeast to rise. He knew kids liked chocolate chip cookies more than Italian biscotti, and most importantly, he knew how to wait, not to fix or prove, but to watch someone grow the way they were meant to. Harper, on the other hand, wrote, a little each day. At a worn wooden desk by the window, with a slowly cooling cup of tea and her laptop open, she typed the first lines of her very first book, Wealth Without Ego. It wasn't a financial guide, not a memoir, just quiet, honest thoughts about building wealth without losing yourself, about the value of silence, about trust that can't be bought, about lessons the press never asked her about, and she never needed to say until now. Cole didn't ask what she was writing. Harper didn't ask what he was baking next. but their hands often brushed while tidying the kitchen, watering the plants, or quietly signaling to each other when a deer wandered into the backyard. They didn't say, "I love you" every day, but they washed the tablecloth together when it got ink stains, stayed silent when the other was tired, shared half an apple from the lunchbox without comment. One afternoon after the kids had gone home, Cole was washing a baking tray when Harper stood quietly in the doorway, watching him for a long time. She didn't call out. She just watched. He turned, caught her gaze. No questions, no guesses. She smiled, he nodded. And that was enough. Because for them now, love didn't need to be confirmed. It was already happening every single day in moments so small the world usually missed them. New York City in the final stretch of winter seemed a little less hurried. The wind still bit cold, the streetlights still traced long lines down each avenue. But in a quiet corner of East Village, old memories seemed to linger. Not faded, not forgotten. Just waiting to be touched again at the right moment. Cole held Harper's hand, guiding her up the old wooden stairs that led to the rooftop of a 3-story building. They had walked nearly 10 blocks to get there, past honking horns, familiar cafes, and strangers' indifferent glances. No one recognized them, and no one needed to. When they stepped onto the roof, Harper paused. Before her was a view that hadn't changed much in 10 years. Rusted iron railings, a few faded potted plants, and a string of lights that someone, somehow, had kept hanging all this time. But in the quiet golden glow of the late afternoon, this place wasn't what it used to be. It was no longer where she hid from the world's gaze. It was where she had once learned to stand tall, alone. "Do you remember this place?" Cole asked, still holding her hand. "I used to stand here every Sunday night," Harper said quietly, "when I wasn't sure I could afford rent for the next month." "I know." She turned to him, startled. "You know?" Cole nodded. "After I learned your old name, Harper Delaney, I dug through a few old records. Not to invade, just to understand. You lived here for 4.5 years. No one knew who you were. No one knew you started Quinn Capital from a folding table in a 3rd-floor apartment." Harper looked down, then back up. "Why bring me here?" He didn't answer right away. He let go of her hand, took a step back. Then slowly he knelt down. No ring, no roses, no music playing somewhere in the background. Just the sound of wind rustling through her hair and the heartbeat in Harper's chest pulsing faster than she wanted to admit. Cole looked up into her eyes, no shaking, no hesitation, but no pressure either. "I don't need you to be a billionaire. I don't need you to be strong all the time, or right, or in control of everything. I just need you to be someone who dares to trust her heart again." Harper stood still. Every wall she'd ever built trembled, not because they were being broken down, but because someone had finally knocked with the right rhythm. Cole extended his hand, not holding anything, just an open palm and the full weight of trust in his eyes. "Marry me, Harper, not because the world needs to see it, but because